G'day everyone, welcome to Inside Rugby. My name's Mark, and in this video I'm going to be talking about the Wallabies selection for the Rugby World Cup. No Michael Hooper and no Quade Cooper. Okay, if you haven't been here before, my name's Mark. I'm a Kiwi living in Cancun in Mexico, trying to spread the love of the game of rugby across the world. So in this video I'm going to be talking about, yes, the Wallaby selection for the Rugby World Cup, and Eddie Jones has done it again, folks. Pulled some rabbits out of the hat with some big surprises, and the first two that we can talk about is the omission from the team of Michael Hooper and Quade Cooper. So was this expected? Probably not, but let's dive into it a little bit more, because I think there's a bigger backstory here than maybe what we know about. First of all, many of you might know that Michael Hooper had been suffering with some mental health issues away for the field of rugby, and he's been dealing with that in the background for quite some time. And I wouldn't be surprised if there has been some serious conversations taking place around that. I don't know that for a fact, but I'm sure that there's something else going on here that we're not privy to, and that it's none of our business when it comes to Michael Hooper's well-being at that level. So Eddie Jones has decided that Michael Hooper, one of the Australian stalwarts over the last 10 years of Wallaby rugby, has been left out of this Rugby World Cup team. And it doesn't really matter how you look at it, it's going to have a big impact, I think, on the way that the Wallabies play. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a negative thing. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in this video. Now, the second omission out of the Wallabies team has been that of Quade Cooper, and I've got to say, on a personal level, I'm quite happy about this. I've said in recent videos, I've been quite vocal about it, I don't rate Quade Cooper as an international star player, and I think with the Eddie Jones mentality that obviously has been shown in the selection of this group of players going to the Rugby World Cup, that Quade Cooper doesn't fit into Eddie Jones's plans. And I think we've got to realise that there is a time and a place for certain players to fit into a team, and really they've got to step up and show that they're worthy of it, and Cooper hasn't been doing that on a regular basis, I feel. And he hasn't shown a lot since he's come back from injury, and maybe that's one of the issues. Maybe his injury is a little bit bigger than what we all know about, and that could have been another reason behind why Eddie Jones has left Cooper out of the team. Now, the reason I don't like Cooper that much is because if you really analyse his play around the ground, he seems to be often quite indecisive, and there's no doubt about it that he has spontaneity as a characteristic. He sometimes breaks out some brilliant few minutes of rugby, but across the field for a number 10 in that position who really needs to understand, I believe, the game management of the game. If you compare him to someone like a Richie Mo'unga, it's night and day between those two players. So I think Eddie Jones, by the selection of this squad, is looking absolutely to the future. He's backing the young guys, and he said that in the press conference. So that's good to see. Now, why don't we get on and have a look at the squad that Eddie Jones has picked to go to the Rugby World Cup in France, starting on September the 8th, just over 4 weeks from today. Okay, let's have a look at the forwards that are going to the Rugby World Cup for the Wallabies. And first of all, we have James Slipper, and I'm pretty sure there's no surprises there with Slipper's inclusion in the team. Taniela Tupou has played well throughout the Rugby Championships and deserves his spot. Pone Fayamamasole is in there, and he's been playing really well. Zane Nonge, we saw Zane come on in one of the recent games as a replacement, played well. Blake Sharoop's in there as well. Angus Bell, probably the standout forward, I think, from the Rugby Championship and Bledisloe games, played extremely well, and I think he's definitely one of the best tight forwards in the world at the moment. Dave Parecki also played well during the Rugby Championship. Matt Faisala is coming in there as well. Jordan Ulesi, and we saw Jordan Ulesi actually away from injury from the last game. The All Blacks pulled out during the warm-up of that particular game. Richie Arnold's in there, again another player that had a very solid Rugby Championship and Bledisloe series. Nick Frost as well in the lock position. Will Skelton is going to be one of the co-captains of this team. That's an interesting announcement from Eddie Jones. Matt Phillip, Fraser McWright, Tom Hooper, who I think has been playing outstanding. He's got a huge future in front of him, has Tom Hooper. Played very, very well in the Rugby Championship and the Bledisloe Series. Rob Valentini showed that he's really good when this Wallaby pack is going forward, and can do some dynamic things off the back of the scrum and the set pieces. Rob Leota was very, very good as well, and Langy Gleeson. A very good forward selection there. Plenty of youth, I think, across this whole Wallaby team. The average number of caps per player is only 20. So it's a young, inexperienced side, and not since the 1990s when Australia won the World Cup has there been a more inexperienced side, and that may be a good thing heading into this World Cup. Eddie Jones thinks it is, and whether you like him or not, Eddie Jones is going to be providing us with plenty of entertainment as we go through this Rugby World Cup. So overall, I think a really good forward pack. The only thing that I'm concerned about is the front three, whether or not they're going to be able to handle it against world-class opposition if they do make it into the knockout phase of this Rugby World Cup. But as a lot of people say, once you get into that knockout stage, then anything can happen. Okay, getting on to the backs, and let's have a look at the Wallabies backs that have been selected to go to France for the Rugby World Cup. Isaac Finis Lilawasi is in there. Tate McDermott at halfback and captain. He's one co-captain, so him and Will Skelton will take the lead in captaining this side. Nick White, Carter Gordon, who also played very well, I thought, through the Rugby Championship. He's coming to grips with that 10 position, and he's going to have a lot of responsibility on his shoulders going into this Rugby World Cup. Ben Donaldson comes in, a new name. I don't know much about Donaldson at all, so looking forward to seeing him play in the Wallaby games. Lalakai Foketi is in there. Isaiah Parisi, Samu Karevi. We all know Karevi's credentials when it comes to international rugby. Solid in the midfield, gives the Wallabies a lot on defence and attack. Looking forward to him playing in the World Cup games. His partner in crime, Jordan Pataya, also been playing very well, and I think that combination is a great combination for the Wallabies. Max Jorgensen's in there. Andrew Callaway at fullback. A few question marks over this position, whether or not Callaway was the right person to get in there, or Tom Wright. It's been Callaway that's been selected. Eddie Jones is putting his faith into Tom Callaway. Marika Koribetti, as you probably know if you watch my videos, probably one of my favourite Australian players, Koribetti. Expect him to have a huge World Cup. He'll be everywhere, both in defence and attack, and I'm sure he's going to be scoring plenty of tries for the Wallabies in this campaign. Then we've got one of the superstars, or potential superstars for the Wallabies, I think, Mark Nawa Kwanta Wasi. And he's been playing very, very well in the Wallaby jersey. I think he's learnt a lot in this Rugby Championship and Bledisloe Series, that's for sure. He's been on the defensive in a lot of those games, but he's also broken out, scored that intercept try against Argentina in Australia, and has a big presence on the field. He's got fleet of foot, which can get him through any defence. Exciting player. Expect to see a lot of him in the Rugby World Cup. Then we have Suolelesi Vinivalu. This guy is super dangerous. Watched his career in the Melbourne Rebels for the Rugby League, and he was an outstanding try scorer. And once he gets a little bit more adapted to rugby union, this guy is going to be super dangerous. Expect him to score a lot of tries in the Rugby World Cup. And once he starts scoring some tries, his confidence is going to go up through the roof. And we've seen a couple of defensive lapses from him, but I'm sure that Eddie Jones and the team are going to get around him in training and support him and let him get in there, particularly against those lower ranked teams in the Australian pool, so he can gain some confidence. So expect Vinivalu to have a very strong Rugby World Cup. I'm putting a lot of emphasis on that guy. And then last up, Josh Kemeny comes in as well. So that's the Australian backline for the Rugby World Cup. Some interesting players there, some young players, but also a lot of cohesion with the likes of Karevi and Pataya at the centres. And I think it's going to come down a lot to Carter Gordon and how he performs in this Rugby World Cup. With Nick Wright in there and Tate McDermott, I think they're going to be able to settle Carter Gordon down, and I think he's going to have a really good World Cup. So what was interesting for me yesterday, I was listening to an interview with Sir Steve Hansen, the ex-All Blacks coach. One of the best rugby teams that have ever played the game was coached by Steve Hansen, arguably, and he brought some interesting insights to Australia and what could potentially happen in this Rugby World Cup. And I agree with Hansen in terms of once you get into that knockout stage, anything can happen. You only have to win 3 games then to win the Rugby World Cup, and it becomes, I wouldn't say a lottery, but because of the draws, it can really make a difference who's got through to that knockout stage in a better condition without so many injuries than the other teams. Now, of course, Australia are playing in the Group C, Pool C, and they have Wales and Fiji as their biggest counterparts. Now, I think Fiji are going to be the dark horse for getting through to the knockout stage. I'm not predicting they'll win the World Cup, but I'm expecting them to cause some upsets. And with Wales and Australia in that same group, it's going to be a case of who does the best out of Australia and Wales against the Fijians. And I think if Australia are able to get through that game and have a win against Fiji, then they're going to see themselves into that knockout stage, and I think anything can happen. What I do like about this Australian team is since Eddie Jones has come in there and they've played those games against the All Blacks, we've seen improvement. We've seen them go from playing extremely well for 15 minutes up to 40 minutes. And if they keep on that trajectory and they have those lesser games in the Rugby World Cup to build combinations and confidence, then I can see Australia being very, very dangerous in this Rugby World Cup. I know a lot of you are going to boo-hoo that idea, but I believe a wounded wallaby is something to be wary of, and I think Eddie Jones loves the media attention around what's happening with the Wallabies at the moment. He's actually deflecting a lot of the pressure off the players, and more than a lot of the big teams that are going into this Rugby World Cup, the Wallabies are definitely underdogs, and I think they can have a big run in this World Cup. Again, if they get into the knockout stage, anything is possible. For instance, if the All Blacks have a bad loss against France in that first game, what's that going to do to their self-belief and their momentum into this tournament? Whereas Australia starting off, if they have good wins against Wales and Fiji, it's going to really set them up well with a lot of confidence. So I think one of my dark horses for this Rugby World Cup to win the World Cup is Australia. I think Fiji are going to be very difficult to beat in Pool C. Wales, Australia, Fiji, those are going to be the 3 that are going to be fighting out for those 2 positions. And then once we get into the knockout stage, I think it's game on for anybody. So I like the look of this Australian team. Eddie Jones has said, right, let's clean the slate. Let's start with new players, new experiences. Let's give these young guys a go. The expectations is not very high now from the Australian public, and Eddie Jones has got a little bit of rope, I believe, to be able to go forward and do something good with this Australian team. So I'm really interested to know what you think. As always, I'm trying to build this channel into a collective initiative where we all have our respectful comments going on, sharing our opinions across the rugby world on what we think about all these particular topics and games that we're heading into. So please drop me your comments and let me know what you think about this Australian team. In particular, let me know about the forwards. Do you think that this is a good forward options for the Wallabies? Do they have enough versatility in there to cover positions, particularly in the back 3? And do you think their tight 5 is going to be able to match it, particularly with the Fijians and the Welsh to start off with, because that's the first hurdles that they need to overcome? Like me, you might agree that the Australian backs that have been selected in this team have a lot of potential to break open defences across the park in most of their games. It's going to be interesting to see how they handle defence, and obviously that's something we saw in that second Bledisloe Cup game against the All Blacks. When the All Blacks came back into the game, those Wallabies fell off a little bit in that second half. So please drop me your comments, let me know what you think. That's been the big announcements out of Australia today. Quade Cooper and Michael Hooper not selected for the Australian 2023 Rugby World Cup team, and it's all going to be on the young guns to see what they can do for the Wallabies. Okay, that's it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Mark. This is Inside Rugby. Stay with us throughout the warm-up games and the Rugby World Cup this year, 2023. And I'll see you again soon in another video. Until then, stay well, stay safe, and enjoy your rugby. Bye for now.